Good morning. I think it's still morning, yeah. It's 10 after 11. This is April 7th, 2024. And I am Joe Wenberg, Bluebird Semaphore. I'm doing as I said I would. I'd post some more world history posts, videos, whatever you want to call them. And I'm simply encoding them with the date. Instead of giving it a number like I did from the beginning, I'm just going to give the date, which will give anybody who's looking at these a numerical or a time difference to judge the order of these little discussions I have. So today's discussion is going to be about two categories. One has to do with China, and the other has to do with a cottage built in Dorset, England. We'll get into that, but I'll start with China. And I came across this book actually a while ago, and I really didn't pay much attention to it. But when I finished the last book I was reading, I decided to go back into this book, and the name of the book is China, Captive or Free. It's by one of those missionaries that went out to China. I think he spent 4 decades out there, by the name of Gilbert Reed. And he did quite a bit of looking into the status of China and of its peoples and what was going on. Now, this book was written in 1921. And Reed was coming at his book from the point of view of World War I, which by 1921 was basically over. But, how did they get there? What are the parameters that make such a tragic event as World War I not only happen as it did in Europe, but how it spills over into the Far East. And the book so far that I'm reading, he's making all sorts, and I kind of agree with this guy so far, but all sorts of claims that the Far East probably should not have got involved, But the point is, the belligerents, the Germans, the British, the French, to a certain extent, the Americans, and the Japanese, they were all over China at the time. So they were there. A number of them were the major participants, belligerent participants, in World War I. And Gilbert makes a statement, and I think it comes clearly out of his own head. I don't think it's something he read, but he's saying that what really makes war is not the 2 or 3 nations standing up facing each other and exchanging bullets and other projectiles. It's the fact that even before they're doing that, they have these agreements, these treaties. And those agreements, those treaties make war inevitable. It's going to happen. If one belligerent is in a military sort of way with another belligerent, with another belligerent, somebody, then once they go on the attack, these other countries have to get involved. And there you have war. You not only have war, but you have world war. You have countries beating on themselves all over the place. So I believe that this fella, Gilbert Reed, was right on, hit the nail on the head there. And as a matter of fact, I think in my recent readings, meaning the last 2 or 3 years, I came across where over there in Europe, those people that sit around tables and decide how the world is going to be, I think they said they're coming up with a code with some sort of a code that would make war illegal. So be that as it may, they could come up with all the man-made verse that they want to. It's yet to be seen that could be effective. But something like that is kind of like shooting for what I think Reed was shooting for. In other words, you get rid of the agreements, you get rid of war. And you get rid of all these people, having each other's back, you get rid of war. Now, the book, I tend to want to give it was written in 1921, so it's over 100 years old. And you would think, and it reads like this is all ancient history. The world doesn't behave like this anymore. The world's behavior is quite radically different today than it was in 1921, yet it's not all that different because all these troubles were based on how much money can I get out of China? What can I, make China go deep into the mud of its vast rivers and be submerged and subsumed in that rather than doing wonderful things for the people that live there, which it certainly was in the power of China to do. Jesus, it's a massive entity. It could have done whatever it wanted to do. But, the Chinese themselves got a lot of bad advice, and they listened to it, too. And Japan at the time was trying to make itself the top dog in the region. And this missionary guy, his knowledge seems to be centered around this area here. I'll try to show you. Maybe I'll turn on the light. Maybe you'll see it better. Can you see it better? This area here. Okay, where is it? This is it. Shantung Peninsula, right here. The Germans had a little spot on this. It was either here or there on one of the coasts. And the Germans had gotten into this, taking pieces of China away from China. They were kind of like the last guys into this effort. Britain and France had been in there quite some time, and they had gotten a lot out of it already. Then along came Germany. They wanted some of this action, and they got it, They try to be decent about it, but, you're taking somebody's land. How can you be decent about that? That's ridiculous. And, as it's so perfectly abundantly clear that the Europeans themselves were just so outraged by the fact that Hitler, the animal, was going to be in their countries, stepping all over their people and their properties, and making them German. They were so outraged by that. How can they do that to us? Yet it was perfectly all right for them, these nations that are going to get stepped on by the animal. They did it to other countries, and there was no problem with that. We could step all we want over China. We can do whatever we want in Indonesia, so on and so forth. and it's perfectly all right. You know, I think it gets down to that because we got God on our side, business. I mean, a big reason why they were able to get in there were, of course, due to the missionaries. You know, although neither the Chinese nor the Japanese welcomed those missionaries with open arms. They always had a fight to get a square inch of territory where they could put up offices for their missions. And I think it's very telling that Gilbert Reed finally practically gave up trying to convert the Chinese, and he made his efforts going forward to be only about converting the upper classes of the Chinese. It's just, you get that throughout history, you know, the segregation of people into upper classes and then the masses. You get that throughout history. It's a given. You're going to be talking about a nationality, a country, or whatever, a group of countries. You have to take into consideration that they've been subdivided into classes. The upper classes who have everything, and the lower classes who have basically nothing. And that's history. That more or less is history in a nutshell. You don't really need to know much more, you know. But you know, they obviously people have made a cottage industry out of talking about history, about this war and that war, and the battles and the dynasties and blah 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 blah. When actually all it's about is the haves and the have-nots. That's history. Now, so Reed wrote this book, like it said, China, captive or free. I don't know what he's going to come down on when the book is all over. It's not that long. However, I don't think you'll find it on your library shelf, being it's like 100 years old. It's probably been out of print for 70 years. But he's got 4 or 5 other books. Maybe you'll find something by Reed, R-E-I-D, Gilbert. I wanted to show you over here where we had this. One of the things you'll come across it's inevitable if you're reading about the history of Far East Asia and Japan and all that stuff. Over here is Port Arthur. Port Arthur is the place where Japan soundly defeated the Russian Army Navy, who had come galloping down here over the Siberian Railway, plus by sea through the Suez Canal and steaming up here, and they were going to beat the pants off those little yellow devils. The yellow devils turned the table on the great Russian fleet, and they won. But what's interesting and why I'm really pointing this out, this map is fairly recent, maybe 60s or something. And Port Arthur, underneath it in red, it says USSR Naval something. So this piece of China is controlled by Russia. As you can tell, it's pretty close to that piece of real estate we now call Korea. Okay, I'm trying to find where it is. Korea. This could be it. This could be Korea right here. But yeah, that troubles me. Let me look like this. This is Korea. And if you go up that coast, this is Korea. If you go up this coast, you'll get into Vladivostok. So you got like a Russian axis there for military purpose. That's saying to the rest of the world, this is our sphere of influence. Stay away. So, just wanted to point that out in case you're wondering. So there was a lot going on here, an awful lot, with Japan being down here, and Japan thinking that anything around here was really theirs for the taking. Some famous incidences took place here to get the ball rolling as far as warfare. I think I'm not sure which war, but one of them, they actually staged a fake military coup kind of thing on the railroads going up to towards the north. They staged a coup, and it was all fake, phony, fraud stuff. But from that, the Japanese could claim to the rest of the world that it was their right to go in there, go into Manchuria, and kick some butt, because that's what they did. And they stayed there big time. I do believe the Chinese did come storming back at some point, and that point may have been in the beginning, way in the beginning of World War II, but I'm not sure. This stuff becomes a big blur in my mind. World War I, World War II. A lot of it sounds very similar. Very similar. I don't think I need this light anymore. So I just wanted to talk about that concept of if you didn't have the agreements between the nations, you wouldn't have these big-scale wars. And like I said, I do believe I read somewhere that over there in Europe where they sit around and use your taxpayer money to come up with all sorts of wonderful ideas that are going to fix the planet. They said they were going to outlaw war. I could just see how that law would write, if anybody goes to war against somebody else, we're going to kill them. It's just, how stupid can they be? But in all of that, you'll see the great tragedies that took place before World War I in China. Great tragedies. I want to say tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of civilians slaughtered. Just a terrible, terrible blot on human history. Although there's so many blots you can't see the forest for the trees or something like that. Okay, now let's go to the other topic. The other topic is a place called Clouds, plural, Hill, which is a smallish bungalow in Dorset, England, which is over towards the southwest of England. And it's infamous in world history because T.E. Lawerance, who at the time wanted to be called T.E. Shaw, not Lawrence, he bought this derelict cottage because he needed a place to get away. He was by this time private in the Army or in the Air Force. I forget which part he was in. He was in both at different times in his life after the Arab deal. So he bought this derelict cottage. He and a couple of buddies who lived with him in what we would call the barracks, they call the hut on camp, on the base. Him and a couple of his buddies from the hut put this thing into shape, and eventually it was in really good shape, and he would use it like on weekends, getaways. He would have big-time visitors like George Bernard Shaw, and I think he may have had Allenby, whatever his last name is, the general, who he worked very closely with during the Arab dealing. And they would go to the cottage, Clouds Hill, and stay there. Now, he designed that to maximize what little space he had. He had a ground floor and he had a second floor. The second floor were all under the sloped eaves or sloped roof. So there wasn't a lot of space, there wasn't a lot of headroom, but he did it. And this place is on the internet, and it's really a quite attractive looking spot. It's the kind of place where if you weren't sidetracked by all the nonsense that is thrown in front of you as you live out your existence, you would probably warm up to a place like this. It has everything you need: space, fireplaces. It's situated in a lovely natural setting. What could you want more? He had a gramophone upstairs to listen to his classical records. And by the way, to show you what a nice guy old Air Forceman First Class Shaw, Lawrence of Arabia, was to his hut mates. They didn't like classical music, obviously, because, they never got raised up. But he would, when he would right away for people to send him the LPs he wanted, he would always include or ask for, at least some of the times, he'd ask for some standard music so that his hut mates would get a chance to listen to the gramophone, which he did have while he was still in the hut, and then he had it again in the cottage. Now, in the cottage, I don't think there was electricity, and I don't think there was running water. But it certainly looks eminently dwellable. You could definitely see yourself living in there. There were two fireplaces, so it was going to be warm in the winter. No beds, but what he used was and is sleeping blankets, sleeping bags. And he had two of them. And they were identified as in foreign languages, and I'm not sure if it was German or French or what, or maybe even Latin or Greek, because he was a scholar, this guy. And he basically said mine and yours. So if you were staying over there, he was in mine, and the person staying with him was in yours. He had something very unique carved into the lintel over his front door. I forget what it was, but it may have been something like "Stay out." No, it wasn't that, but it was something imaginative and perhaps a well-known quote, but something like that. He actually didn't have the ability to cook in there either. He kept whatever food he had under a glass cover, glass bowl. And then he would buy food in town, which wasn't far away. From what I gather, it was like a mile and a half away. So he would get his food in town, he'd get his whatever he needed. Maybe he'd pick up his mail, so on. Now, he for a very long time had motorcycles. And as you may or may not know, that's how he died in a motorcycle accident. He was going from the cottage into town, and the weather was less than optimal. The streets were wet. The streets were poor anyway. And there were a little bit of inundations in that road, such that at certain points you couldn't see what was ahead of you, because they were down farther before they came back up again. So he's going there, and he comes over this one hill. There's two teenage boys riding their bicycles side by side, which is illegal, but that's what they were doing. And in order to avoid them, he swerved. He went flying. I think he went flying into a tree head first, and that was it. He was in a coma for 6 days, and then he died. Now, this man was instrumental for getting the Turks out of the Middle East. I mean, he almost did it single-handedly. All the other big shots, the French and the English couldn't do it. He went in there and he did it. I don't care what you say if you watch that movie Lawrence of Arabia, which really is not him. That is not him you're seeing on the screen. No, it's exactly what he was afraid would happen. Because every reporter on the planet was going after him while he was still in Arabia. And actually, he was only there 2 years to do all of this. And he said, when I'm gone or whenever, they all want to make a movie of me. And I'm afraid they're going to get some pretty boy to play me. And, gee, I don't want that. And that's exactly what happened. Not only did they get a pretty boy, but they got somebody who was quite known for his alcoholic abuses. I heard recently that to do some shots, they had to make him sit down. That's what I heard, but because he couldn't stand. We're talking about the actor there who shot that movie. Well, so he was instrumental in getting Arabia set up, but I don't want to forget the gal who was maybe more instrumental in outlining the look of the Middle East as we know it today. In other words, where Iraq has its boundaries, and Saudi Arabia, and the Palestine and Jordan, and much of that, and that was, of course, Gertrude Bell, who, I don't know if I put this up in front of you ever before, but this is the book on her. Well, there's many books on her, but she's called the Queen of the Desert. And where she is, that's her, and this is Lawerance. That's him. And of course, this is Winnie over here. Can't forget Winnie. Winnie and Lawerance became pals. Lawerance became pals with a lot of the big guys. The Shaws. I'm talking about George Bernard Shaw and his wife. And old B.S., he rarely got along famously with anybody, but he got along real well with Lawerance. And, guys like them, they knew everything. Just somehow they know everything. And I guess Shaw appreciated that. And by the way, when Lawerance decided to change his last name, he picked Shaw based on his relationship with the Shaws. So I had not known diddly about Lawrence of Arabia before not too long ago. And there's a book I read called Hero, which pretty much breaks down his life, although, as I'm finding out, no biography is all that complete, but it's a pretty good one, biography. I can't think of the guy's last name, although I do believe his last name is the same as a well-known composer, 20th century composer, out of one of those Middle Eastern, or maybe just Eastern European enclaves. He was this fellow who wrote this book was somehow related to these composers, although he was more of an author, perhaps journalist, and so that's what he did, and he wrote this, and he very, very admiring of Lawerance. I mean, quite frankly, when you see what this guy did, you can't help but admire him. I mean, nobody could do this. Nobody could do what he did. The guy was unflappable. Just amazing. And Gertrude Stein was another one like that. But with Gertrude, she was born into so much money. So much money. The father could have bought England. That's how much money they had. So she did whatever she wanted to do. She got a good education. This is Gertrude Bell. As a matter of fact, she's the first woman to get a first in Oxford. I think it was Christ College she went to. I don't know, maybe that's not right. But in Oxford, she's the first woman to get a first. In other words, she came out top in her class. And that just didn't happen in those days. But it did. And she's certainly as worthy as Lawerance is for praise, for getting to the nitty-gritty of the Arab culture and those lands. Although she didn't fix it, neither did Lawerance, neither did anybody, because we still got the oil wars. You know, we still had the fiascos in Iraq and Afghanistan. Lawerance was actually, I believe, posted to an Air Force base when he was the private. He was posted to an Air Force base in or close to Afghanistan. And I have to say that if he hadn't got killed in that motorcycle accident, I mean, the history of the world probably would have been different. Real different. Because as World War II became an absolute reality, he would have been in the Foreign Office, the Minister of Defense, the War Office, everybody. He'd have everybody's ear, and he'd be telling them what they needed to do to prevent the next tragedy. But he was already dead. He died in 1935 in that crash. And if he had been alive, I believe a lot of World War II would never have happened. So those two teenagers who were in the road that day, they have a lot of guilt on their souls. And I'm not letting them off the hook. Oh, they're just kids. No, they broke the law riding side by side like that. And they killed a great man. But what are you going to do? A lot of great people get killed. You know? It's just absolutely disgusting what humans did over the last, let's call it 20,000 years. Just absolutely horrible. How you could say these people are civilized is totally beyond my comprehension. Totally. You know, I'm fortunate. I may not see another human being for 3 or 4 or 5 days. So I don't see a lot of civilization. And thank God. It's just, if we can get it wrong, we will. That should be our motto. We, the people, will get it wrong. So there you go. All right, that's enough for today's little lecture. I'm itching to get some piano music up, and I will. I know you're all dying for that. Okay, so we talked about Gertrude, we talked about Lawerance, and we talked about Gilbert Reed. And by the way, the Arabs couldn't say Lawerance. They called him Lawerance. So think of how that would come out of your mouth. You know, you'd have to cut off the first part, and instead of saying Lawerance, you'd say Lawerance. If you haven't looked into Lawrence of Arabia, I suggest you should. And if you haven't looked into Gertrude Bell, I suggest you should. She was also one of the very first women. Well, not the very first, but an early alpine climber before she even went to Arabia. for her real mission in life, she stopped off to climb the Alps half a dozen times. She did, I believe, ascend the Matterhorn, which I'm being told that that's not the biggest deal in the world, although it's the highest peak in the Alps, 14,500 generally speaking. And she did climb it, and it wasn't, she said it wasn't as difficult as some of the other peaks she climbed in the Alps. But I think if you do get your hands on Gertrude Bell, Queen of the Desert, you'll get an accounting of those climbs in the Alps. Of course, like I said, she had the money. The family had more money than all the rest of the world put together. The father owned the coal and iron industry of England. He owned it, everything. She wanted this, bang, she got it. The only thing she didn't get was love. She didn't get love. Her lover, for some reason, couldn't marry her. I forget why. Probably because I think the father shut her down on that. He's not good enough. Out. So she never had that love of her life. She had a few men stand by her, for very long periods of time, and they certainly loved her, including many of her Arab servants loved her. But she never got to marry. She wanted to have children, all that stuff, She was a Victorian bred, You got to have children. If you don't have children, what good are you? That was their outlook. I could go on and on and on about all this nonsense we call history. But I won't. What I'm going to do is shut it down because I got things to do today, and I want to do them. So here we go. Bye. I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening.